Cool. All right, you can hear me? Nice. Awesome. Thank you, Gulistein. Thank you to the entire ITU blockchain team for organizing this awesome event. And yeah, for all the volunteers here. Organizing events is not easy. I'm somewhat familiar with it. And so congrats to you all. And let's do a big round of applause to all the organizing team who put this event on. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the future of crypto, the future of Web3. And yeah, next slide. And I'll introduce myself a little bit for, next slide, there we go. Introduce myself a little bit for those who don't know me. I'm Skylar. I work with the Ethereum Foundation, like Gulistein mentioned. And I'll share a little bit about how I entered this ecosystem because it might be relevant to some of you here. I found Bitcoin in 2013 when I was 18 in college, in university. And so I actually was like, just discovered on the side. Most people, there was no class about Bitcoin back then. There's still probably very few classes about blockchain in general now. Most people had a lot of doubt around it. And I actually found it because I wanted to buy fake IDs on the Silk Road, and you had to pay in Bitcoin. So I ended up discovering that. I ended up losing all of my crypto, my Bitcoin back then in Mt. Gox. Who knows what happened with Mt. Gox? Yeah. One of the first big exchanges that got hacked. So I learned my first lesson in not your keys, not your crypto. So definitely always remember that one. And then yeah, in 2016 I discovered Ethereum. I was a developer at that point. And after discovering Ethereum, I was fascinated even more. I went to DEVCON 3 in Mexico as a volunteer, actually. Along with Lane, here's up in the front, also another volunteer, and yeah, that kind of like changed my perspective on Ethereum. Like, I went there kind of expecting to see talks around trading or things like this about investments, and that was none of it, right? People were talking about the future, like problems that existed in our world and how we can use Ethereum to solve them. And so I continued to participate in DEVCON and DevConnect teams. And it all started from when I was a volunteer. So for those of you volunteering in these events and volunteering in other events around DevConnect Week, I think it's a really great way to get involved and stay active in the ecosystem. And yeah, next slide. So today I lead the team of the DevConnect team and the DevCon team as well. So DevConnect, I think you all are familiar with DevConnect, right? It's a week of many independent events happening around a city. This city we chose this year is the amazing city of Istanbul. Big round of applause for this beautiful city. Hope you all are planning to attend a lot of events this week. I think many of you have midterms, so that's a challenge. But maybe what you learn in some of these events might be worth more than what you learn in your midterms. I don't know. Don't tell your teachers I said that. So, and also DevCon is another team I work with, and we have, next slide, yeah, we have DevCon 7 coming to Southeast Asia next year. So we have 1 year before DevCon 7. The location is yet to be confirmed, yet to be announced, but if you're looking for a nice trip in November-ish of next year, this could be a nice destination. Next slide. But today we're not talking about DevCon or DevConnect. We're going to talk about the future of crypto. Actually, I think my gum out. And actually, the title of the talk on the slides, I think, the agenda was Future of Web3. I prefer personally to call it crypto. I think Web3 has kind of received a lot of negative news, and I like the values of like crypto itself. Different than cryptography, different than cryptocurrency. Crypto is what I prefer to call the field myself. But next slide. We can talk a little bit about it from the perspective of Web3 also. But in order to do that, let's recap what is Web3, right? Like, when we can do this by starting with Web 1. So what was Web 1? Web 1 gave us the ability to read on the internet, right? So this was essentially in like the 1990s, early 2000s. We had the ability to look at websites and mostly just read. Like, we couldn't really interact much. This was before Facebook. This was before MySpace. It was a pretty stationary, non-interactive ability. Then after Web 1 came Web 2. where we could then read and write, right? So we could post on Facebook, we could post on MySpace, we could now interact with the web. And that brought a lot of interest, right? So I'd say today we are still in the Web 2 phase, right? All of Uber, all of the apps we use today are mainly Web 2 applications. And then now we're talking about Web 3. So what is Web 3? Web 3 is the ability to not just read, not just write, but also own, right? Now we have the ability to own digital assets, own things on the internet. And this is new with Web 3. Before this, this was not possible. And I think this is a big innovation, a big change. Next slide. I think that the change from Web 2 to Web 3 is much bigger than the change from Web 1 to Web 2, right? If you think about the ability to read and write, those are similar things, right? Like your ability to read and write on something is like the same domain. And I think it's a big change to be able to write all of a sudden on the internet, but it's not changing your mental model that much. You don't need to really rethink how you do something because it's just adding a really similar ability. But when you talk about owning, which we're talking about with Web 3, the ability to own on the internet, own digital things, is another category. It's different than just reading and writing. And this is like, it's talking about ownership, property rights, and things of like security around those ownerships, and that's a much bigger change. And for that, I would say that Web 3, this Web 3 innovation is a paradigm innovation, right? And so what's a paradigm innovation? A paradigm innovation refers to a significant shift or transformation in the fundamental framework or model of how things are understood or created or utilized within a particular field or industry, right? Basically, it's a massive change, right? It requires a change in your mental model, like how you think about things, how you model things in your brain needs to change when you encounter a paradigm innovation. And so examples of paradigm innovations are things like the printing press, the telephone. Right, when the telephone was invented, it probably took a while for people to recognize like what you could do with the telephone, right? And for it to reach adoption and for it to be understood by the masses. The transition from analog to digital technology is another paradigm innovation, a big shift. It changes the mental model. The introduction of the internet is another paradigm innovation. And I would say that combines both Web 1 and Web 2. Like, once those were here, that was a big shift for people. And smartphones is another paradigm innovation. And next. And so here I would say that Web 1 to Web 2 was more of an incremental innovation, right? It's cool. Facebook, MySpace came out. That made the internet a lot more useful. And that's what really pushed the internet to mass adoption. But I don't think it was a big innovation from Web 1 to Web 2. Web 2 to Web 3 is a paradigm innovation, right? Here we are changing the mental models. When you talk about reading or redefine, like when you talk about ownership, like redefining how you own something, it's a lot more difficult to understand, right? Like it's like more of a societal thing, right? Defining who owns what is kind of more required for all of society to change the way they think versus just you redefining how you read and write something, right? So like ownership, I think, is a much bigger innovation. It's a much bigger change. And for this, I'd say Web 3 is a much bigger paradigm innovation. Next. And so with paradigm innovations comes lots of doubt, right? You all seen it here, and we've seen it before, right? Paradigm innovations are hard to predict. So just based on your past experience, you might predict that something will happen or progress in the future, right? You have horses. In the future, you want to have faster horses. But most people weren't expecting the automobile to come around, right? You have post-mail, the physical mail. You want faster mail. Most people weren't expecting email to come around. And so paradigm innovations kind of bring these changes where people have to rethink how they approach a certain domain, and it's hard for them to predict. There's also lots of doubt, right? So when email first came out, when the internet first came out, what did we see? We saw a lot of doubt. Like, why would we need computers? Like, they're big, they're slow, they're inefficient. I'm never going to have one of those in my home. Email is complex. Why can't I just write a letter and put a stamp on it and give it to somebody to deliver? You saw that a lot before. And we see this a lot now also with crypto, with Web3, right? People don't fully understand the benefits it brings. They're happy with their bank. They're happy with their fiat currency. They're happy with their Web2 services because, yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty. Uncertainty also is something, so like if you ask, like I encourage you to go back to your grandparents or your parents and ask them, what did they think about computers and the internet when it was first coming out, right? When it was first coming out, what did they say? Mine say that like, oh yeah, it was interesting, but there was no way we ever thought we were going to have one. My grandmother, I tried to teach her how to use the iPad, and she was just never going to learn it. Like there's certain people who have mental models, right? They're hard to change. And this is the next part. So it takes generations to adopt. So once you have a mental model for so long, it's difficult to change it, right? Like, just like I mentioned, my grandmother, she was never going to learn the iPad. Like, I tried as much as I could. And I think there's people who, once they're, like, the mental models are difficult to change, which is why there's a huge opportunity with younger generations, right? People who are, it's why I'm much better at using the computer and my phone than my parents are. And people who are younger here are probably even better than me at that. And people who are younger than us are going to be much better at Web3 and crypto than all of us are, right? They're going to grow up with this stuff. They're going to be the ones that are saying, why do we have to go to a physical bank to write a check to send money? Like, that's insane. They're the ones that are going to say this, and probably some of us are going to be like, it's what we did for a while, so we're used to it. And so paradigm innovations bring a lot of doubt, uncertainty, and they take a long time to adopt. I really think they take generations because you need people who are willing, who don't have their mental models already set. And so, what's next? And so with every paradigm innovation, there are visionaries who see the future. And it doesn't need to be a visionary or like someone who's extremely intelligent or anything like this. It could be someone who just expects, like, the future will not be the same as the past, right? I don't know what the future is going to hold, but I know it's not going to look anything like it does today. And like when you recognize that, you start to think about what are some things that are definitely going to change. And there will be more paradigm changes. I think Web3 is one of them. I think AI is another one. I think there's many more that will come that are hard to predict, but you should be open to these. And I think many of us are here because